Alright, what is up guys? This is my 5.5 Gen 2003 6-speed Nissan Maxima, and my axles are going bad. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go ahead and swap in 6th Gen axles. This only is going to work on the 6-speed. I don't think it works on the auto, but basically the 6th Gen axles are much thicker and stronger, so they're a pretty decent upgrade, and they're about the same price as 5.5 Gen axles for the 5.5 Gen. I would do both sides, but I've already tried filming this video. I already tried doing the whole job on Tuesday, and I had quite a bit of issues regarding my passenger side, but the driver's side's already in. I'll put some clips of that in if I have them right now. And I finally have the axle out, and I put the axle seal in on this side. I don't know how much of this you can see, but I'm going to try. There's an internal clip on these driver's side axles that hold it in, so. Driver's side axle is in. This is the new 6th Gen axle. It does fit, as you can see. It doesn't rub anything. I can't like really show you, but it still rotates. It's going to be pretty difficult because it's a brand new axle. It kind of needs to break in, but it doesn't rub on anything, so we should be all good. And it is also 9:30 at night, which is not 9:30, 8:30 at night, which is sick. Super easy. It's literally just like a normal 5.5 Gen axle swap. No issues there. Passengers where you're going to have some problems and where you're going to have to change a few things. So, alright, so in terms of what you're going to need for tools, this is going to be it right here. All you're going to need, I'd say all as if it's not that much, but what you're going to need is a 32mm socket for the axle nut. You're going to need a foot-long 3/8 extension for your axle retainer bolts. You're going to need an assortment of sockets. All you really need is the 12mm, and you can get away with just using a deep. I don't think you're going to need shallow sockets for this. You're also going to need a 17. Get into that later. Obviously a ratchet for that. I have an electric Milwaukee ratchet I'm going to use just because it makes things so much easier. You're going to need a 10mm Allen bolt for the fill plug for the trans. You're going to need a, I don't think you're going to need this, but I used it. It makes it way easier. It's going to be a flex head ratcheting 12mm. You can buy these pretty cheap at Harbor Freight, and they work out great. You're going to need some pliers. Some sort of hammer. Obviously a dead blow is going to be optimal, but if you don't have it, you can get away with just using a normal hammer. You're going to need 1/2-inch sockets, or whatever you're going to use to take off the wheel and the strut right here. I'm just going to use 1/2-inch sockets. You can get away with only deep, but I recommend having both just in case. You're going to need some sort of tool to get that off. You can use a breaker bar, but again, I have an impact. This will make it super easy. And then you just need the axle bracket for the 6th Gen axles. I'll talk more about this later once I have the front end of my car apart. Alright, after you have your front wheel off, you're going to need to remove this cotter pin. That's where the pliers come into play. I wonder if I could try and take it off with one hand so I could show you. There you go, take the cotter pin out, and then you're going to need a 32mm socket to go over this nut right here, and it's going to be on there pretty tight, so you can either use an impact like I'm using, or you can use a breaker bar, and you can put the wheel back on the car and take off the center cap. This will fit through the wheel, so you can get it off, or you can get someone to hold the brake for you. I'm going to go ahead and use the impact. After you get that nut off, you're going to want to make sure you can actually move this. Mine was recently greased because I had to put this axle back in the car. If you can't push it in, you should put the nut back on and hit it with a hammer just so it can break it loose. That way it can go in and out of the hub. And then what you're going to have to do is disconnect the brake lines up here, the ABS sensors from their little clips, and you're going to have to take off these two bolts. It's going to be a 19mm nut and a 17mm bolt on either side right here. What you also could do is a lower control arm, but I wouldn't recommend that just because you can cause issues. It's much easier to just do the suspension because this kind of just drops out, makes it super easy. Here's the axle right here. You're just going to want to leave it right here because after this we have 3 bolts in the back. Right here on that bracket. You're going to have to hit them from behind, which makes it super weird, but this is why I recommend having the flex head. I'll go ahead and get under here for you so I can show you. Right here is going to be one of the bolts, right there. So that one you're going to go ahead and hit with a flex head. These are all going to be 12mm bolts, and then the ones on the top two is when you need the extension, because you actually come from the back here, go over the exhaust on top of them, and then you can take them out with a ratchet. There's the one bolt, and here is the second bolt. Right there. Once you get those bolts out, you're gonna need to get a drain pan for the trans because the trans is right here. And I was not expecting the first time I did it, but this thing pissed out fluid and quite a bit of it. So just be ready with a drain pan. As soon as you pull that axle out, it's all gonna come out. It's coming out. And then, again, there it is. Okay, axle's out. And as you see, there it is, draining all the fluid into the pan. Luckily, I caught it all, so that was quite the W. But yeah, that's all you need to do. Then, for these cars, you're gonna have a bracket inside on the engine block, which is gonna be this guy right here. So you're gonna need to take 3 bolts out for that. It's gonna bolt in, let me see if you can kind of see that. There's 3 bolts, it's gonna be 2 on the front side and 1 on the back. They're all 14 millimeter. They're not gonna be super duper tight, so you can get it with a hand and it'll be pretty easy. Now this guy's out. That's all you needed to take out for this. Alright, so as for the axle brackets themselves, right here, we're gonna have our stock 5.5 gen axle bracket. This bolts up to the engine block like that, and the axle slides in and bolts right here. For the 6 gens, there's gonna be 2 different kinds. Do not make the mistake of getting the wrong one. This is why I had so many problems for my axle swap on Tuesday. This one comes off a 6 gen. I thought it was the right one. I thought it came off of an 02, or not an 02, an 04 to 06, which is gonna only come in 6-speed manual and a 5-speed auto. Either the junkyard marked it wrong or I made a huge mistake because this is the wrong one. For this one, the big thing to look at is the distance between these bolt holes. This one will not line up. It'll fit through, it'll bolt up to the block, but it'll have fitment issues because this sits close to the block and then it won't slide into the trans or this fully, and obviously the bolt holes won't line up. They'll all be about a 1/4 inch off. The big thing with these is these are 4 inches apart from center to center. What you want to focus on is this one. This is going to be the one you do need. It said, when I went to the junkyard, the car took this off, said 2007 on the car, but when I went to the website, I looked at all the blue 6 gens they had, which is what it came off of, and they only had an 04 and an 05. So either the junkyard's lying or what, but to be fully sure, you need to measure these bolts. The distance between these ones on the bracket you need is going to be 4 3/8. So just pay big attention to that. If you have a tape measure, bring it with you. I can go ahead and try. I'll try to kind of show you on video here so you can see what I'm talking about. Measure the wrong one first. As you see, about middle of the bolt to there, it's going to be 4 inches. We'll do the same measurement on this one, and as you see, it's about 4 3/8. So you really need to pay attention to this. This is going to be the one you need. This is what it looks like. Those are all the numbers on it. If you can't read it, it's going to be J1106355P5. And that is all the marking on this one. I don't know if it's going to be the same for every one of them, but by the chance it is, those are the numbers you're going to have to look for. The way these all mount up, they all mount up the exact same. So as you see on the bottom here, they all use 3 different holes on each side. They all have these little line-up dowels in each side on the same one, and they all have these little pins that help align it on the block. So these will all fit on the VQ35DE, the 1st gens, but again, this is going to be the one you want right here. This one also moves the axle farther away from the block. As you see, this one, it's pretty flat, so it's going to be closer to the block, so it won't line up with the trans, but this one will let it line up with the trans because it sits farther forward. Again, just make sure you have this part. This is going to be the only part you need for the 6 gen swap, along with the axle. I'm going to go ahead and show you the differences between the axles right now. I'll pull that one out of the block. These are going to be the 2 axles right next to each other. It has the same amount of splines here, same amount of splines here, here, and here. They're about the same length. I believe they're off by 1/10 of an inch, but it won't cause any problems. And the reason people do this swap is because if you look at the size of these boots next to each other, this one is much smaller than this one. These 6 gen axles are way thicker, along with the brakes and everything else on the 6 gens. So people line these up, or some people have done these. I've never seen any in-depth videos about it, so it's kind of difficult to gather all the research for it. These have the same amount of pins on the ABS rings right here, so these will all work just fine. And again, I needed new axles for my car, so I figured I'd get the 6 gen ones just because they're nicer. As you see, everything on them is thicker. Everything on them is just better quality overall. Use the same size bolts. Everything on these are the same except for these little mounting bolts here and the size of these, of course. As you see, these ones, these are threaded and these are much smaller. These are not threaded because the bolts actually go through, and this sits out a lot wider. This is the 6 gen swap, and this is why people do it right here. Mainly when you lower the car, these tend to go out quite a bit just because the angles of them when you lower these on the Maximas are not ideal. You can get engine risers, but if you don't want to go through the process of installing different engine mounts, then I'm sure this is going to be a good idea. and they're about the same price as 5.5 gen axles, and I needed them anyways, so I decided I'd go with some thicker ones because these are technically an OEM Plus upgrade for the 5th gen. So I'm going to go ahead and throw these in now. Alright, as you see, we have the bracket in here. The 3 bolts go into the engine block. For a torque spec, I don't have one, but just snug them up, get them pretty tight. They are screwing into an aluminum block, so just be mindful of that. Don't super torque them, but there's just the 3 bolts that go in and they fit in there just fine. Another thing about this swap is it makes it super easy to service the axles because you can actually get the bolts from the front right here instead of go from behind, so that is also a plus to this. I guess an unintended plus, but it does count as one. All you gotta do now is, of course, slide your axle in and then put the bolts in. You're pretty much all done. I mean, this is a pretty easy swap. If you're doing axles, I would just do this anyways because it can't hurt and it's nothing but beneficial. I didn't mention for these is you also are going to want to grease this section up just in case you ever need to take this off again. It'll make it a lot easier because these can seize to the bracket and make it super difficult to deal with. So I would just suggest doing this as a preventative measure so they don't get stuck. But just a light layer of grease will be just fine for you. Again, it's not there to actually help anything. It's only for servicing in the event you need to take it out again. Okay, just like that. Literally all there is to it. Now, after that, I'll go ahead and show you guys. Axle is now made it up to this surface right here. That's where the bolts are going to go in. And over here in the trans, it is inserted all the way. Now you're going to put those 3 12 mils in here. I don't have a torque spec for those either. Again, just snug them up because they are pretty small bolts. They're just M8 thread. They're pretty thin, so you don't want to strip those. But yeah, that's really all there is to it. Having a long extension is going to help a lot for these as well, just because you can actually get them. Also, having a wobble extension helps so much because you can go ahead and get around some of these tight areas. And then this one up here is going to be the last one you need to get to. I'm going to go ahead and get it from the other side though. Now I'll go and get my actual ratchet on here and just snug these up, and then we'll be all done for most of the swap. And then for the same reason you put grease on the actual axle bracket, you should do the same thing for these splines just because it can get stuck inside the hub. And this also makes it a lot easier if you ever have any problems like that. This is the reason why the 5th gen axle right here came out so easily, is because last time I took this out, I ended up putting grease in it so it wouldn't be an issue when I had to do these again. And it ended up working out. I'll go ahead and take out the strut. There it is. Okay. Now, this axle's in. Now, we can go and bolt this up to the strut again, and then we could start doing the actual axle. Brake line is now fully connected. ABS sensor, they just slide in. Not too much, because we still need to torque it. Alright, now in order to torque this big bolt down, what you could do is have someone pressing the brakes, but then that puts a lot of stress on the suspension component, so I don't really like doing that. So what I do is I get a screwdriver right here, and I get my stock wheel, and I just go ahead and pop out this center cap, like that. Comes out super easily, and now the 32 mil can actually fit through this. So what I'll do is I'll put the wheel on with a couple bolts, lower it on the ground just so that the wheel's touching it, and then after that I can actually torque it down. I believe the torque spec on these nuts is going to be 217 foot-pounds, so get a torque wrench and make sure you do that, and then you can put the little safety cover on this and the cotter pin just to make sure this can never come off. And you're basically done. All you got to do is fill up a trans fluid, and for trans fluid, make sure you buy GL4, because if you buy GL5 you will ruin your transmission, because these cars use brass synchronizers. GL5 has sulfur in it, and that can destroy synchronizers if they're brass. Right here is the 75W90 GL4 gear oil. I'm not exactly sure how much I leaked. I leaked a lot less than I did yesterday. It's out from here. As you see from inside, I don't know if you can see it, but it's probably about 1 quart came out of it, so just be prepared to put a quart in it. The fill plug is going to be right here. That's what the 10 millimeters for, and again, you literally just fill it up till it starts seeping out of that fill hole, and you're all set to go. So after that, what you want to do is you want to drop the car on the floor. That way the trans is actually level, like fully on the ground under its own weight. You can turn this wheel left, and it gives you a lot of space to fill it up with a pump. And you just do that, and then you're all good. We now have this nut cover on here and the cotter pin. Now we can go and put the wheels back on officially. I recommend turning the wheels all the way to the left. That way you can make it easier to fill up by the drain. Alright, so this drain plug right here does have a torque spec. I forgot what it is. I'll put it in the video right now, but if you don't have a torque wrench for that, which I don't think I do anyways, just go ahead and snug it up. Again, it is an aluminum trans, so be careful with that. Alright, so I finished the axle swap yesterday. I didn't show any videos of it actually driving. I'm going to go ahead and show you full lock to full lock that there's no issues with the car. As you see, it's in first now. That is fully locked. I'll go ahead and just start up here. Fully locked. Driving no problem. And then of course the other way, that's full lock. Driving no problem. I'll go ahead and stop right here and I'll show you the axles as much as you can see them. You probably won't be able to see much, but you can see something. In here, axles are doing fine. Axles are doing just fine. They went in perfectly. There's no like noticeable feel differences, but the differences will come in durability, and over time you'll kind of see how much better these axles are for the car. But yeah, that's pretty much the whole swap done. Thanks for watching.